All right, we've been given the signal to get started, so thank you for joining us today. So is everybody enjoying the lovely cold New York weather the last few days? Everybody surviving? The other day I was taking the kids to school and I asked my wife, do you know what the temperature is? And she said, oh, it's really warm today. I said, really? What's the temperature? She says, 34. The day before it had been -1 Fahrenheit. So you can see everything is comparative. And one of the things we wanted to do in the research that we undertook with IDC was compare what shoppers were looking for and what retailers were looking to do and see how those two things compared and if they lined up. So my name is Graham McVie. I work for Precima. Precima provides analytics and software, and we apply that to retail customer level data to understand customer needs and make price, promotion, assortment, personalized marketing, and supplier collaboration recommendations. And I'm delighted today to be joined by the esteemed Greg Girard.
Thank you, Graham, the esteemed Graham McVie. So I'm Greg Girard with IDC Retail Insights. IDC is a global market analysis, research, and advisory firm with 1,100 analysts worldwide. We have about 20 or 30 who focus on retail globally. It's been a pleasure to work with Graham. I must say that he's one of the best clients I've ever had. That's a high bar to make, right? Let me ask a question of the audience. How many have been here for more than 20 NRFs? 15 NRFs? 15, 10 NRFs. So a lot of newbies. Okay, that's great, because I think what we're going to show them today is some very innovative research, right? That whether or not you've been here for 20 years, 15 years, 5 years or less, you're going to see some really interesting stuff.
Yep. So we partnered with IDC. We did a rather extensive piece of research. It included several thousand retailers. I think we surveyed over 3,000 retailers.
3,000 shoppers and 200
3,000 shoppers.
200 retailers.
200 retailers. And we look to get that number of responses so we can slice the data in a lot of different ways to get a lot of great insights. And we're going to cover 3 topics today. Greg's going to talk a little bit about the grocery industry and the transformational turmoil that's gripping the sector just now. We're then going to talk about the shopper dynamics that are driving some of those changes, and then we're going to talk about what are those implications for food retailers. So Greg, why don't you kick us off in the first section?
Okay, let's see, this will advance us. Okay, so I'm going to address some of the supply side aspects of the transformational turmoil that retailers are facing. Graham's going to follow up with some of the demographic and customer-oriented differences that are causing transformational turmoil. You hear a lot about digital transformation, but turmoil comes first. It's the compelling driver. So if you look at this, there are issues around pricing, price wars, price deflation in certain categories that are depressing margins and changing cost structures. Then there's some industry structural transformations and differentiations. You've got a couple low-end, or I should say low-price positioned European price leaders, Aldi and Lidl, who are coming in and are really undercutting who've been our price leaders and changing their assortment strategies with narrow assortments, really targeted and well aligned with smaller store footprints, going where Walmart can't. And then Amazon bought Whole Foods. Believe you me, that's not the last acquisition that Walmart will make or that Amazon will make with a brick and mortar. And then new competitors of new types of ways that people can eat. Because ultimately grocery is about satisfying a need of how we eat and how we feed our families and how we get enjoyment out of that. So we've got the we've got the meal kit services being delivered by Blue Apron, Fresh Direct, and my favorite out of Boston, Purple Carrot. Also, look at that statistic in the middle. Food retailers only provide a third, 35%, of all the nutrition, calories, and so forth, meals that we in America consume. The rest is out-of-home delivered, out-of-home meal from restaurants of all sorts, more from delivery and from home, more recently from meal kits and the like. So grocers overall have lost a tremendous market share. 10 years ago, the statistics were different, and Graham will talk to the differences there. Now, look at what on the left-hand blue panel, that's what Amazon's doing. They have 800 million Prime members, that's 800 million households, 80 million households. There are 110, 117 million households in the US, 126, tremendous penetration, and they're higher income. right? Higher income. Now look what Jeff Bezos said on the right-hand side. Invention requires a long-term willingness to be misunderstood. And indeed, Amazon has been misunderstood, but their intentions, their direction and strategy has been pretty well revealed. So, shopper dynamics, is that where you're going to speak to?
I'm going to talk to that for a little bit.
Okay.
So obviously, retailers don't just change for the sake of it, they change in response to what shoppers want and what shoppers need. So there's a lot of shopper dynamics out there in the marketplace that are driving some of those changes. When we surveyed the consumers, the 3,000
Now wait a minute, shoppers aren't fragmenting, right? It's their spending that's fragmenting.
Yes, that is a good observation, Rick. Yes, thank you for clarifying. We actually asked them where they spend their time in terms of the number of grocers that they talk to and how much they spend in different places, and then what drives them to fragment their spend across different areas. There's a relatively low number of shoppers that actually only shop in one store. I think it came out about 19%. So there's a lot of shoppers out there that shop in multiple places. And we actually asked them, would you prefer to shop at one store or multiple stores? 60% said they would actually prefer to shop at one store if they could have all their needs met, but only 19% actually did. And the reason for the fragmentation are shown here on the slide, because we actually asked them, why do you shop in multiple stores rather than one? A lot of it is around price, some of it's around different products, some of it's around looking for convenience. There's a lot of different reasons for that. But then we also asked, why would you actually want to consolidate your spend or shop in one store more than others? And a lot of them were focused around assortment topics, things like product quality, fresh produce, and improved assortment selection, including localizing assortment for the individual stores that they shop in. So there's a lot of different reasons that drives fragmentation. There's a lot of things that are within the retailer's control to bring them back. So most shoppers want retailers to deliver the basics. This was interesting when we asked them, what is important to you when you are selecting where to shop? And we gave them a whole long range of options from low prices, good promotions, assortment, customer service, all those different things. The reality is all shoppers want the basics. There's no difference there between any of the generations, any household sizes, any household locations. They all want the basics. They want good prices, good assortment, quality products, good customer service, good stores, all those things. But we did see some interesting insights when it came to the factors that differentiate how people think about retailers. And some of those factors are really important as differentiators. So you can kind of lose shoppers by not doing a good job on the basics, but you really, if you want to stand out, you have to talk about some of those differentiators. And personalized prices and promotions was one of those ones that bubbled to the top, which frankly I was a little bit surprised at how high they came.
If I could jump in on the personalized prices. So we asked that question two different ways. What do you most expect and want from a retailer? Then we said, what don't you expect? Don't you expect but want? And personalized prices rose to the top among older shoppers when we asked it the second way. Because they don't expect it, but if you delivered it, they'd love it, right?
Yeah, so that again was a little bit of a surprise that all generations were interested in that. We've typically found on the younger shoppers, they were more interested in the prepared foods, the plated meals, meal kits, e-commerce, the usual ones. So I don't think that was hugely surprising, but the personalized prices was one.
But with respect to that last one, that's really a substitution for all that food spending that's gone over to restaurants. Right? And that's how retailers are trying to, or grocers are trying to achieve more that share of stomach, right, that would have gone outside the store.
That is exactly right. And I actually applaud the grocers for doing that. They recognized they had an issue and they said, how do we address that? And they've introduced these new services.
And there are acquisitions of certain companies that are allowing retailers to do that.
Right. I'm sure some of you saw that Albertsons bought Plated, one of the meal kit providing companies. So if they can't develop it themselves, they're going to with acquisitions. So. Okay, Greg, this one's over to you.
Okay, so actually, thank you for giving me this. So shoppers' time is valuable to them, right? Nobody likes to shop, but we prefer to spend our time in different departments differentially, right? So people like to spend time in fresh fruit and vegetables. The perimeter aisles, perimeters of the store, where there's a lot of investment. There's a lot of risk because those items are much more perishable, and the display needs to be really fine-tuned and takes a lot of time and attention. And that's effort well spent. That's where retailers or consumers want to spend their time or find it valuable. Same with fresh meats and fish. Then we looked at a couple different types of categories. We looked at center store. We also looked at some of the other areas that retailers are trying to use to attract. You know, the bakery good that always smells good when you walk into a grocery. You know, that get that cinnamon smell in the air. They not so much, right? That's not a real driver of where they prefer to spend their time. And home products and health and beauty care are at the very lowest. So do you want to go into the next ones? Or? Yeah.
Actually, just one point to build on that. What we're also finding is shoppers are fragmenting their spending by department as well. You know, so it's the classic situation where you'll go to your traditional grocer for some of your traditional food center store categories, but then you might go to one of the premium retailers for some of the fresh departments, and then you might go online for some of the others or to a big box retailer. So this concept of where people spend time and how they're fragmenting their spend, it kind of comes together.
You know, a couple of years ago, BCG, I think it was, looked at the new luxury, right? And new luxury used to be cruises and diamond rings and so forth. So it's really a bifurcation of where we want to spend. We overspend, spend above our means in certain things that are valuable to us, and we'll underspend in other areas, right? So a higher end shopper in, say, across categories in clothing might really prefer Target for other things, right? Or shop at, in my area, Market Basket for food, but we'll shop at Bloomingdale's for women's clothing.
And that talks to the point about customers have a certain set of needs and they can't get all those needs satisfied in one store, so they're actually self-selecting into different retail types that satisfy different types of needs. So one of the interesting aspects that came out is this concept of the boomer generation versus the millennials. The boomers were the largest demographic in history, and now they've been surpassed by the millennials. The millennial cohort now has over 80 million shoppers, and retailers end up in this interesting situation where the boomers are still a huge number of their customers and a huge amount of their spend, so they have to keep those boomers happy, but they also have to recognize that they have to plan for the future, because if they don't, they could find themselves without a customer base in 10 or 15 or 20 years time, and those needs differ. And what we found was that the younger generations were less loyal to their national brands, whereas the older generations were more brand loyal. They're kind of used to their national brand products, especially when it came to options in home products and health and beauty care. The boomers knew what they wanted, they went in the store, and as long as those items were there, they were happy, they didn't need a lot of choice. The millennials, though, wanted a lot more choice in the assortment. Coincidentally, where the saving factor comes in here is that the younger generations are typically more willing than the older generations to purchase online. And when we asked them what categories they'd be happy to purchase online, it lined up nicely that they're willing to purchase home products and health and beauty care. So retailers can actually satisfy needs in stores for the older generations, and they can satisfy the needs for the younger generation with an expanded assortment online, so you can meet both those needs together.
I think Graham just alluded to some of these points earlier, and this is a age demographic breakout of preferences for different attributes of products, right? So as he said earlier, established national brands really appeal to the mature adult, right? The 51 to 70-year-old. We're not old, are we? No, we're just mature.
All attitude of mind.
There you go, exactly. But you know, I think people like me, even in this demographic, still and more so the younger millennials are much more interested in the eco-healthy products, ethical products, those products that have a social responsibility, are better for you nutritionally and health-wise, and it reflects a different set of values. And I think that's an important point to realize, that as we try to engage shoppers, as retailers engage shoppers, we don't want to just understand a 360-degree view of their relationship with a retailer as a retailer, right? They're much more interested, we should be interested in a 360-degree view of all aspects of their values and their interests and so forth. And there are ways to start achieving better insights about that through loyalty programs and through gamification, like achieving badges and the like, which would declare through behavior what they're really interested in and allow retailers to define assortments and products more tuned to those demographics. New product innovation, right, is becoming more and more important to youngers as well. Now, this gets to the point of new product success rates, And they've always been horrible, right?
Terrible, yeah.
Terrible. And you don't want to disappoint your future cohort, right, with products that are not satisfactory. So that really puts the onus on being better at new product development. And it also puts a emphasis on better allocation of space and slots and facings, right? So that you can really optimize assortments within a gondola, within an end cap, within a category, and even more importantly, across the whole store, right?
Absolutely.
That's really, really critical. So that's 11. And so what are the implications here for retailers? Graham mentioned earlier the interest in where we would like to shop and buy online. This really is a scary implications here. Because you look at those where consumers are most willing to purchase outside the store, right? That's that center aisle area of the store. That's low productivity. It's carrying, especially with home products, low value, bulky products, which is prime real estate that can be utilized by more higher value, more desired products where shoppers can really have an experience that engages them in things that they really want to do. But fresh meat, poultries, and so forth are still the core anchor. So expand those categories, make them better, drive those to health and wellness. And then we saw some very interesting demographic breakouts there as well.
Can I just make a quick
please.
point? So obviously this is kind of eye-opening that some of the categories down the bottom have such a large percent of the sales could migrate out of the store. We should emphasize there's still over 50% of all categories of preferred purchase place is the store. So the stores are still going to be important and an asset, but it's about how the retailer uses that asset most effectively. You have to create a differentiated shopping experience in the store to make sure that people will have a fun time in the store and they want to come back into the store. And if you don't do that, then you're going to struggle to retain your customer base. But what is interesting, when you look at the analysis, there's a relatively small group of shoppers are migrating most of their purchases online. It's not all shoppers, it's not the majority, it's a relatively small group of shoppers that's migrating most of their purchases online. But what you look at is there's a much bigger segment of your shoppers that are migrating a sizable portion of their spend in certain categories online or out of the store. So if a retailer has shoppers that value e-commerce and online shopping and they don't offer that to their customers, they're going to be competing for an ever-shrinking number of shoppers, and they're going to be competing for an ever-shrinking number of dollars in certain categories. And the last time I read a business book, they said, don't participate in a shrinking market, look for the growing market, because you're competing for an ever smaller number of dollars that you can actually acquire. So retailers need to sit up and take note. If they've got shoppers that value e-commerce, then they really need to embark on this. There was one retailer I spoke to, and they said they were actually sitting out the e-commerce game because they didn't think anybody had worked out how to make it profitable yet. And while I applaud the financial aspect of that decision, the reality is if you sit out too long and your shoppers value e-commerce, by the time you get there, they could already be gone.
I think it's the wrong metric.
Right.
It's the wrong metric. Yeah. It's not how valuable that particular aspect of your business is. Yeah. It's how valuable the shoppers are to you that prefer to shop that way. Right? So you might be losing shoppers who are valuable to you because you're myopically focused on the profitability of an aspect of your business. And it's a growth aspect of your business, right? Absolutely. And it's a growth aspect of shoppers' preferences, right? So you always have to keep a foot firmly planted in the present and anticipate and change. Now, this hollowing out, if you will, of some of the categories is freeing up space, a point I tried to make earlier. And that's really good news. That allows for differentiated activities in the store that you might add to others. We saw one thing that we saw about plated meals and meal kits not being bought from a grocer is that they were hard to find. They weren't in the right place in the store. But so if you're shrinking home products and health and beauty, you might have more space for that. The other thing is, even though you might be shrinking those, or you might have less demand for those things, that emphasizes the importance of curating the assortment there, that they really meet what consumers want. So we asked them, in terms of valuing time, and the most important aspect of valuing time was I want to see in the assortment things that people like me buy. And that's sort of that's just a truism, isn't it?
Yep.
But it's really, people are less tolerant. Some are browsers and are just looking around because they're exploring, they want to understand what their possibilities are. But others are really focused on laser shopping and they want to see just what they like.
Yep.
So we mentioned earlier prepared foods and meal kits. They're attracting valuable segments. Now in the marketplace, amongst consumers, there's still a little misunderstanding and ambiguity of what a meal kit is. Just for a definition, it's something that's boxed up and it has all of the measured amounts with a recipe, all the things you need except maybe a teaspoon of oil to prepare a particular meal. This morning I saw a couple ads for Blue Apron. That's one of those. And it's increasing. It's still a small segment. But remember, it's a way that's introducing excitement, fulfillment. The values of these types of things aren't just nutritional, they're not just cost, but it's the experience of what the preparation of a home meal does for the family.
Yeah,
right?
It brings them together.
Brings them together. So there was one about mom got a promotion and the son makes dinner from a meal kit, right?
That's cool.
So you're celebrating the youngster becoming an adult and taking on responsibility, and a single mom's promotion, right? So it's a time-starved household, and there's a celebration delivered by the meal kit. You really can't do that if you're just selling groceries.
Yeah,
right?
and I mean,
you've got to sell a purpose, not just a product.
Yeah, and just to build on that, we also see a change in the way that people are shopping. You oftentimes used to see in the old days, people would go and do the big stock-up trip on the weekend, and then they'd have everything in the pantry and the fridge, and they would cook during the week. You're actually starting to see some of that dynamic change, especially amongst where you have dual professionals working in a household or dual earners in the household, and you're starting to see more people not making a decision about what they're going to cook until the day of the meal that they're planning. And a lot of people now are starting to, they will stop at the grocery store on the way home that night to pick up what they're going to cook for dinner that night. And they're doing that in competition with the fast casual service to take out food. And if a grocer understands they have shoppers like that and can set up a section of the store, as you mentioned, at the front, because someone, when they're on their way home, they don't want to walk all the aisles or go to the back of the store for the milk. They want to get in, pick up their meal kit or their full prepared meal, and then get out and get home so they can put a relatively healthy meal on the table for their family. It brings the family together. So there are some shopper dynamics here that grocers are reacting well to, and if they continue to understand shopper needs in that way, they've got a chance of really tapping into these.
And this goes to localization and store format, right?
Yeah.
So I live in Boston. Go Pats. And Wegmans, that great retailer out of Rochester, New York, right, has just moved into the Massachusetts-Boston market a couple years ago. And most of their stores up there are the larger footprint stores that have made them a famous great grocer in their home markets and others that they've gone to. In my neighborhood, they've opened up a very different concept. And the front end of the store is prepared, right? And the back end of the center aisle stuff is very, very small. Right? And it's going to exactly that kind of dynamic that you spoke to. So it's about localization and store formats along with assortments.
Yeah. All right,
we do this pretty good, don't we, the handoff?
Okay, so what are retailers to do? I mean, if you think about the way retailers have historically made assortment and space decisions, I've called it rank and cut here. I've often heard it referred to as rank and yank. You rank all the products based on sales, and then the ones that have the small sales at the bottom, let's just cut the bottom 10%. You can do a slightly more advanced ranking cut where you have a composite of a variety of different metrics, not just sales. You can then look at it by segments and say, I'm going to do my ranking yank based on my most valuable segments and what is most valuable to them. You can then go even further to some of the advanced analytics where you include the ability to forecast with what-if simulation. And then if you look on the right-hand side, the sort of most advanced in that area looks at total store assortment optimization. It's no longer, I think, appropriate to think about assortment in space one category at a time. Some categories need a lot of options in the assortment, and as a result, they need a lot more space. Other areas need less. And consumers tell you that by their shopping behavior. And when you're trying to make intelligent assortment decisions, you're trying to balance a variety of different outcomes. What is the optimal shopper value, where the shoppers value spending their time? How do you understand at a localized level what the demand is? And then how do you make sure from an operational standpoint you can become very efficient with how you manage your inventory and make sure you're having the most effective and efficient inventory investment. So there's a lot of different ways. In my experience, a lot of retailers are still more on the left-hand side in the sort of crawl stage. A few of them are moving into the walk. There aren't that many that have moved into the total store assortment optimization side of things. But let me give you
and on the right-hand side, it's just not the assortment, it's also space and adjacencies.
Exactly,
right.
Yeah, it's all three of those coming. Because that is one of the misunderstood things. When people say assortment, what do they mean by assortment? Because oftentimes they are saying, well, what items should be in the assortment versus not? How much space should they get? What's the macro and the micro space, and what's the planogram look like? So it covers the full gamut of areas there that you have to look at. So I wanted to give you a couple of quick case studies. I always think it's helpful to share some case studies. So when we're talking about understanding what items can be safely removed from the assortment to free up space, it's really important to understand how important an item is to shoppers in general and to your more loyal shoppers as well. And a couple of key metrics that are really important. One is transferable demand. If you have, for example, 2 bottles of water, as we have here on the stage from different manufacturers, if consumers do not perceive much product differentiation between those, they're happy to switch between the two. If you take one off the shelf, all the sales will switch to the other item on the shelf. We see that a lot. And private label products are a really important aspect to this, because when you introduce a private label product, if there's not a lot of product differentiation with your national brands, you'll typically see shoppers will be willing to switch quite heavily to the private label. And a lot of retailers have been very sophisticated on private label and having multiple tiers of private label. So it's no longer just the opening price point value option. It's now you've got premium private label, and they're matching up the premium products from the national brands with the premium products for the private label. And then you start to understand how willing are consumers to switch. The other element is halo demand. So what if an item is part of a broader solution of items? We see this a lot with things like rotisserie chicken. Rotisserie chicken is one of those great aspects of retail. It drives a lot of people to the store. But people don't generally just buy the rotisserie chicken. When was the last time you saw a family meal and they were all crowded around one rotisserie chicken? It doesn't happen, right? They need the vegetables or the salad or the bread or the potatoes or the rice. There's a solution that goes with that. You have to quantify that, because if you remove an item from the assortment and they've got a lot of attached or halo sales, you could be losing more sales than just the item. So when you do that, you get down to what an item's true value is.
Can I just add to that there's another dimension of the additional value of an item. It's how a particular item that might not have great sales is actually driving the sales of another item.
Absolutely.
It's an impact, so it helps the position, the value of that other item, even though that the item being analyzed doesn't have a lot of sales.
Absolutely, yeah, and we see that on a number of occasions. I've got one quick example at the bottom here. You can see here on the left-hand side we have the national brand, on the right-hand side we have the private label. Demand transfers bi-directional. So you can actually have more demand, in this case, transfers from the national brand to the private label if the national brand is not available, but less of it will transfer if the private label is not available and the national brand is. You have to actually quantify it in both directions, because they have actually different shopper behavior profiles. This one is, I think, absolutely fascinating. So we actually ran a total store assortment optimization across all categories for a retailer simultaneously. And we set a goal of X% of the assortment has to be reduced, and we let the analytics actually work out where in certain categories can you take out more items and where can you take out fewer. And I've just highlighted a couple of examples. Categories 4 and 5 here, there's actually few D-list candidates in that, because shoppers value a lot of options in these categories, and the assortment is right-sized for those consumers. But if you look at categories 11 and 12, there's a lot more items can actually be safely removed, because there's a lot more demand transfer and a lot less halo. You want to make sure you've got enough options in the assortment to keep customers happy. Oftentimes we'll see the 12-pack and the 24-pack of bottled water, and you'll see the 2 national brands in the private label. Well, you can easily take the 12-pack of one national brand and the 24-pack of the other national brand out of the assortment. You're still giving consumers all the right options in the assortment. If they're brand loyal, they can still buy a variety of the pack size. And if they're not, then they've still got the private label option in the assortment. So you can free up a lot of shelf space from decisions like that for more important categories and items in the assortment.
And it's total each store optimization, because this will vary by localization, right?
Exactly, yeah. The challenge with, and that is exactly right. So the analytics do that. They can operate at the individual store level. There are retailers that can't necessarily operationalize at that level, so they sometimes have to go to the cluster level, and sometimes they have to go to the total chain level, or the regional level, or the banner level. But we generally find most
that would be their delivery, their logistics behind the dominant area of advertising, things like that would be operational constraints.
Absolutely, perfect. That's great clarification. So we see most retailers are starting to move to a sort of cluster approach, generally driven by the DC, the distribution center that supplies the stores, but it is possible to tailor it at the individual store level when they can execute.
And some aspects of clustering won't be geographic, right? Pricing may not be geographic, right? Because that's not dependent on logistics. Right?
Yeah, pricing is very rarely geographic in my experience. I years and years ago, I used to live in San Francisco, and now I just live outside Washington, DC. And different areas in San Francisco were completely different from each other, and the same in DC. But there was a lot of similarity between some of the more affluent areas in San Francisco and some of the more affluent areas in DC. They were more alike than the other areas of those cities, and the lower income areas were more alike each other as well. So you're spot on with that observation there, Greg. It's also important when you're looking at the individual categories. So retailers make different decisions at different levels. So if you're talking about a department level, you're talking about a chief merchant, they're looking across the total store. If you're talking about an individual category manager, you're oftentimes looking within the individual category at the individual items within the category. So you have to take the total store into account, but you also have to take into account within the individual category. And this becomes really important when manufacturers are looking to get the retailer to introduce a new item, or when the retailer is looking to introduce a new private label item. Which items disproportionately appeal to the best customers, and which items have the highest true value? And if you take that into account, you very quickly identify the items where you can safely delist them, because they're not valuable to your most important customers, and they're not valuable overall to the category from a true item value perspective. And then there are other items you should absolutely not touch. So you have to arm the individual category managers with this information so they can make intelligent decisions as they move throughout the year. Generally, I've seen retailers, they'll have one major category reset a year as part of the category review or category strategy process. They'll maybe have a secondary sort of minor update halfway through the year, but in between those, there's lots of day-to-day decisions that take place about items coming in the assortment, items leaving the assortment. You have to arm the category managers with the right information so they can make intelligent decisions.
Could I ask you a question? Because traditionally, buyers, category managers, are aligned exactly like that by categories, and each has its own domain. Right? Now we're talking about more of a trade-off and a marketplace across category managers who are going to trade and barter for, or it would be optimal for the retailer that they do that, right? So there's an organizational and cultural change and a metrics change that has to happen to support this approach.
Yeah, there absolutely has. I mean, we sometimes see this as well on the pricing side as well as the assortment side, where some categories are good at driving volume, price perception, all of those things, and some are good at driving sales and profits. Well, you should be differentiating the targets for each individual category manager on that basis and be willing to make trade-offs across categories. And there's a number of companies out there. In fact, we were talking to Win Weber recently, and he has a whole shopper solutions which is tailored towards how you actually redesign your organization to take more of a shopper approach than a category by category approach. And he's had some success with that recently, but it does require those transformational components to go along with it. When you introduce a new item into the assortment, you better make sure that you're tracking how it's working. Trial and repeat analysis is a great mechanism for that. So you can see the chart on the left there. The yellow portion of the bar is trial. It's when our customer is first trying the product. The green portion is when they've repeated. And what you want to see over time is the yellow gets smaller as more and more people have tried it, and the green get bigger as more and more people are repeat purchasing it. And if you actually plot them on a chart like we have on the right there, if you get high trial and high repeat, you generally have a good product and good packaging, good marketing, so that's a keeper. If it's the bottom right, then the marketing and packaging is good, but the product itself is not good because you're getting low repeat. If it's top left, you're getting low trial but good repeat. You want to look at your product and marketing there. And if it's in the bottom left, you probably should start over again to make sure you're not.
Let's stay on that for a second. Something just popped out, and you haven't really focused on it. So we're really looking at shopper behavior, right, rather than product behavior.
Yes.
Right. So we have to look at the transaction, the T-logs,
absolutely,
right, over time from a loyalty perspective, if we can have loyalty, or if not, just by matching up through a credit card or some other persistent identification, right, of the shopper.
Yeah. So if you have a loyalty card, that's the best way to do it. If you don't have a loyalty card, you can do that sort of debit or credit. There's a hash key that goes along with it. Yep. You can track purchases through time without having the unique customer identifier. So that is a great point. That starts to bring the shopper aspect into these decisions. This is just a final case study. So this is one of our clients we worked with where on the left-hand side you can see the percent of the assortment by category that we actually identified to remove from the assortment. And then the right-hand side you can actually see the impact on sales that came about because of that. So, you know, that old chestnut of the paradox of choice, you can actually reduce the assortment and drive sales growth. You're getting a better shopping experience, you're not overcomplicating it, you make it easier for the shopper to shop.
Could I abstract into, so the notion of paradox of choice is one aspect of what's called behavioral economics. And we are not all rational economic actors, right? We'll bring emotion into the decisions that we make. For instance, we might trade off convenience for price if we're in a hurry, because I want to be on time, right? That's a behavioral economics decision. And this notion of the paradox of choice was theoretically introduced by a business school experiment several years ago with jam displays set up in a shopping mall. Right. And one had 20 different types of jams. The other one might have had 7. The numbers I've made up, but the point's made, right? That those where there are 7, people made a decision faster, and they sold more, and actually there was higher customer satisfaction because the paradox of choice let them wonder, am I really buying the right thing, right?
Yeah. Too much choice can damage you. So this is back to you, Greg.
Yeah. So. We looked at, so these are things that retailers can do, and this slide particularly looks at the so what, right? The so what of same-store sales growth. That's a key store what that all retailers are interested in. And in particular here, we looked at the way that retailers utilized advanced analytics. You know, that's one of the areas that I focus on, advanced analytics and artificial intelligence, machine learning. So for me, if you have a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. Right, but so I focus on analytics, and so the whole world looks like an analytics problem to me. But this really proved it out, right? So those retailers who are utilizing advanced analytics and optimization achieved a 2.5 times increase over those who don't in comp store sales, right? That's really a tremendous differentiator. Graham, when he saw that, was shocked, weren't you?
I was.
Yeah. And then at the same time, on the right-hand side of this chart, we asked retailers about their satisfaction with their current tools. And 50% or more are not greatly satisfied with their tools. So for the vendors in the audience, there's an opportunity to improve the tools that you sell. Or if you have better tools, you have better widgets, like Precima does, right? There should be a big market opportunity for you to, because there's demonstrated value in advanced analytics and optimization, and there's demonstrated desire for better tools on the right-hand side.
Right. So this is yours as well.
Okay, so I think there are 4 key takeaways. We've spoken to all of these, but just to drive it home at the final end here, reconfigure stores, right? So this is not just an assortment. It's a holistic approach to what's the activity in the store, right? The store is more than a place where you sell food. It's a place where you engage shoppers and create experiences. And you can also reallocate space, fundamentally. Invest in e-commerce. There are a host of developments that are happening where e-commerce is being differentiated in a number of different business models. Instacart, for example, with same-day delivery, and that's a tremendously difficult problem to solve and to plug them fresh. They've been able to do that. They've solved it. Try to grab that share of stomach that has migrated off to restaurants, QSRs, and home delivery, right, through the development of prepared meals and meal kits. And remember that with those, you're getting an emotional attachment. And the emotional attachment is really key to loyalty because of the fact that we're not all just economic actors, we're time pressed, and we want a solution to a life problem, not just a cheaper bag of groceries. And finally, on that last point we made, arm your merchants with data, insights, and tools. Data is the oil of the new economy, if you will. And you've got to refine the data, you've got to, as you do oil, and you've got to make sure that it's clean, that it's fresh, that it's high quality, it's complete, and it's timely and relevant, and presented in a way that's consumable. And that's through tools that are data management tools as well as analytics tool. So you can't do much of this or any of this that we've described without great analytics and fundamentally without great data.
Absolutely. So just to wrap up, the clicker stopped working. Okay, there we go, it's working again. The premise that you said about a truism earlier, I think this is one of the few truisms that I feel really confident about in retail. The retailers that best satisfy the needs of customers will win. But there's two important aspects to that. Firstly, you actually need to understand those needs on a very granular, timely, and frequent basis. And then finally, you have to consistently plan and execute and connect it over to strategies and actions in order to actually satisfy those needs. It's no good to just understand them without actually satisfying them. So that would be our key takeaway on the analytics side. Make sure that you're understanding and taking actions. So with that, we're down to the final few minutes. And we wanted to leave a few minutes at the end for any questions that any of you may have. So if you have any questions, feel free. If you feel a little shy and don't want to ask in this environment, Greg and I will be around at the end. But we have one over here.
Hold on. Microphone's coming.
Thank you. All your data are very interesting, and we hear a lot about artificial intelligence. What are the methodology you use to gather all these data concerning the consumer himself, and then the data of sales in store? Sales in store is probably much easier, but concerning at least the customer.
Yeah, so on the customer side, there's a couple of different ways that can come out. There's obviously external third-party demographic data that you can acquire and bring inside. But we actually find that if you have a retailer that has the unique customer identifier and the sales there, you can analyze it by customer, by transaction, by item. And then if you do the right analytics, you can actually understand a lot about customers' life stage. You know, are they singles and couples? Are they families with kids? Is it older kids? Is it empty nesters? Is it seniors? And their lifestyle. You know, are they cooking? Is there high cooking aptitude, low cooking aptitude? Are they more convenience oriented? Are they more price sensitive? They like more private label, more promotions? You can actually derive a lot of great insights about consumers by what they buy. It's the old what you buy is who you are. So you can actually get a lot there. So there's a lot of AI and machine learning incorporated into that. We incorporate all of those techniques, and we make a distinction between descriptive analytics, predictive, and prescriptive analytics, all of which fall under that overarching term of machine learning and AI. And obviously the descriptive is just what happened in the past. Predictive is, if I did this, what would happen in the future? And prescriptive is, here is what you should do in the future in order to meet your customer needs. So you need to have some of those techniques as well as the underlying raw data.
There's a foundational change in what data means, right? Data has to, products, transactions, and customers all need to be attributed, right? It's those things that describe a product. In the past, PIM systems, product information management systems, have been really focused on those attributes that we need to buy something, to move it, to price it, the brand that it's in, and so forth. The precious few of product attributes that we analyze today and retain are focused on how they fulfill customer needs. So if you want to, you can't tell much about a shopper if you know the pack size. Maybe something about pack size, but brand, maybe not, right? But if you knew the ingredients, especially in a grocery store, now you can understand their lifestyle preferences. This is a healthy eater. This is a convenience eater, right? The degree of preparation. Do they buy foods that, I mean, if you had a recipe management system at the back end and you understood that that basket is designed to serve this particular meal tonight, now you've got an insight about that consumer, right? Or that particular meal is a quick serve and preparation meal. You got another insight about that consumer. And so you can.
That actually talks to the point about the value of additional attributes on products.
Yeah, that's the point.
We're seeing a lot of demand for that, and traditionally retailers have not been great about that, and neither have the manufacturers. But we see a lot of things like, is this an ecological product? Is it an ethically sourced product? Does it have only organic ingredients? These are advanced attributes on products that are not traditionally captured. But once you actually get that information, you can drive a lot more insights about the consumers behind the purchase decision. Okay, we're rapidly, one more. Last one.
Thank you. So with the introduction...
Hold it up to your mouth.
Sorry. So with the introduction of analytics into the merchandising process, how are you seeing the organization structure change within the merchandising divisions?
That is a great question, because if you look at the core skill set of a category manager, it's largely centered around buying and negotiating with the manufacturers, not necessarily around the analytics and the insights and all the other decisions. And as the category manager, it moved from being called a buyer to a merchant to a category manager. We even hear things like business development managers with the supply chain. You actually need to augment that skill set with the right skill sets in the organization. And it depends on the types of people you have and all of those different things, but we oftentimes see there's now like an analytics team or a merchandising strategy team that supports the core buying team. And sometimes we find that's the right way to get the right balance as you're starting to transition over to hiring the right people with the right skill sets.
The other side of this is that marketing and merchandising are coming together, right? So if merchandising gives you insights into shoppers, that's really important insights for marketing. So we're seeing a convergence. We like to use the term curation, right? And there are a couple other presentations elsewhere that's utilizing that word. And there's another word that we like to utilize, which is orchestration. So curation is about how we buy as retailers, right? How we buy, how we assort. And orchestration is the collapse of planning and execution into real time. Right.
So Greg, we're right out of time here. So if any of you want any more information, we're over at booth 1125, which is on this floor just across there. We have the report that we put together based on the research. That's available. You can pick that up. And if you don't manage to come over there, you can always go to Precima.com and you can download the report from there. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you found this a useful use of time.